So hi, I'm Namywa. I am an international recording artist and songwriter, and I'm also the founder of Girl Grind UK, which is a CIC set up to support women, girls and gender expanding people on their personal and professional grinds. And today I'm here to talk to you about creating a culture around your creativity, securing the bag, and basically how to build a network. So hopefully that sounds exciting to you, and I'm super happy that you're locked in. So the first thing we're going to look at is creating a culture around your creativity and what that actually means. So to start, we're going to break down creativity and we're going to break down culture. So creativity is about the invention of making something new. It's about the process. It's very much adjectives. It's the doing. It's the how do you get from nothing to something, an idea that comes into your mind and starting to materialize that and make it into something. So that's creativity. And culture. There's loads of examples that we can kind of talk about when we're trying to understand culture, but essentially it's collective power, it's people power. It's when a larger group of people make a decision about the way that you behave in society, or the way that you behave or receive art, or do things, or experience things and have interesting things that happen or don't happen. It's about the culture of how people come together to make those things. So you could look at a friendship group and think, okay, the culture of how we are in our friendship group is that we do pizza once a week. That's a great culture to have, by the way, but you do pizza once a week on a Friday afternoon, and that is the culture around your friendship. So that's your friendship time, and that's the behaviours that everyone in that group kind of meet up and do. Another example is like Secret Santa at office. That might be an office culture that you have, where we just spend £5, no more than £5 or no more than £20 on a present, and that's the culture within that office environment. Other modern ways to experience culture could be about the side of the road we drive on. So that's something that everybody in the UK experiences as our culture. And when we go to another country, we're like, oh, okay, we're different. And that's something that we do at home. If you identify this place as home, or it's just something that we do as drivers on the road here. So we've got a good understanding of what culture is and what creativity is. And now I want to just talk about how you can kind of harness those things within your creativity. So if we move on a bit and look into ideas and go back to that kind of origin of creating something and where it starts from, as humans, we on average have around 80,000 thoughts a day. Which sounds like loads, and if you wrote down 80,000 thoughts, you'd probably run out of paper in your notebook. But some of those thoughts are fleeting, some of them just come and they go. Some of those thoughts turn into feelings because we experience the thought, or it evokes an emotion in us that makes it, wow, I really feel that thought, and then I start thinking about it more. And then we start to move into things like law of attraction and manifestation, when we think about how those things then start to show up in our lives. That's a whole nother webinar, but it's relevant. So we have 80,000 thoughts on average a day, and creative people, I'm going to assume, have more than that because we high process and we are empaths. So we think lots about people and society, and maybe just the colour red if that's your vibe, or whatever it is, but we deep things a lot as creative people. So how do you then discern what idea is just an idea, what thought is just a thought, and what is a brilliant thought, what is an amazing idea? And part of that goes back to those signifiers of, does this idea repeat with me? Does it turn into something where I think, yeah, this is giving me all the feels right now, and I think this is a great idea? And that's something that only you can really decide, but it's a good place to start with thinking, how do I then work out how to build on those things and turn them into something creative? Some of the things that I like to do is ask myself 3 questions around ideas that I want to develop. One of them is, does it help you? So as an individual, or does it help me? So as an individual, I would be thinking, okay, does this idea, does it help me to grow as a creative person? Does it help me to achieve my goals? Does it pay me? Does it help me? Does it give me confidence? Does it reflect my values, my principles, my ambitions, my connection to nature? So those are some of the questions that I would ask, and you can apply them to yourself and think, if you answer yes to the majority of those you questions, then you're on the way to a brilliant idea. The second stage that I think about is, does it help other people? And by that, how do you help other people? There's so many different ways, right? So I think if you start thinking about, does it help them to build their own confidence or their self-esteem? Does it give them an opportunity to experience something new? Does it give them a platform? Does it make them be a part of something? You know, does the idea that you want to do support them equally as it supports you, in different ways, obviously, but is there an equal playing field there with that? And the last thing I ask myself is, does it make a currency? And I use the word currency over money because currency is not always about money. So you can have financial gains. So does the idea you want to do make £5,000? Does it make £500? Does it make nothing? And who's that money for and where does it go? And those might be indicators to say, this is a great idea or it's not. But currency can also be people power, going back to that culture of what we just talked about before. So you can kind of look at the power of currency in people, and does this cultivate community? Does this idea bring people together? And then how long does that currency last? Is it something that, you know, we're making a one-off memory that people are going to live with for years and years? Or are we making a currency where people are going to come monthly or they're going to come quarterly and they're going to just, build that people power currency, which sometimes is opinion-based, but sometimes it's better than money, right? Having the knowledge and the currency of people and power in that way. So if you could answer yes to all of those questions around whether it supports you, whether it supports other people, and does it make a currency, I would safely say you're onto a brilliant idea. And that is a point where you can then start to build. And if you're a person like me who sometimes has lots of brilliant ideas and you don't know which one to start with, then you can start to go back to those original questions and think, okay, what are my motivators? So am I doing this for me? Is it for other people, or is it about currency? And let's just say the currency in this situation is about money-making ideas. So you might then decide which idea to go on based on which one makes the most money, and that might be the reason why. You could say, which idea helps more people? So do I only get to help 50 people with this idea, or do I get to help 100 people with this one? Let's go with the one that helps more. And you might say to yourself, you know, this idea one, is in alignment with who I am and what I want to do, but idea two actually ticks boxes that hit all of my points, whether that's about me as an artist, whether it's got my values and my principles in there, and it's something that is a stepping stone in my career, so it pushes me further. And that's when you can start to like break down those lots of brilliant ideas into thinking about, this is what I'm going to do. When you're there and you've got your brilliant idea or ideas, the next thing to start thinking about is the practice of that. So, or the practice of your culture, right? So how we know what culture means because we've kind of gone over that already. But practice is similar to creativity, but it's not the same thing. And I say that because practice is about the doing, and it is about the process that happens with that. So there is a slight difference between practice and creativity. They're both similar in the sense that they're about the doing, and it's quite cathartic in that process. Something comes as a result of either being creative or practicing. But the difference is that with practicing, it doesn't have to result in anything other than the process. It's the way in which you approach your craft. So there's a culture that comes around that, because if you are a dancer, for example, your practice might be studio based, and then your culture might be looking at, I'm going to explore hip hop, Latin dance, and I'm going to explore tap dance to build a well-rounded attitude and behavioural pattern about your practice, which feeds your creativity. So yeah, I hope you're still with me on that one. So let's look at another example. So if we take theatre as a space where you watch shows, you make shows, especially repertoires, they build lots of things in-house. The culture of the theatre is that it's within that building. Practice might be the process to making theatre, right? So there's lots of different ways you can do that. You can devise theatre, you can make that in the street, you can go to site-specific places and build characters based off people that you see. So there's a culture around theatre and where it is, traditional theatre in that sense. And then there is a practice of how you devise those characters and how you bring them to life might be more explorative and outside of the theatre space. So I want you to think about your ideas that we've already got down. We understand what creativity is, we understand what culture is, and we now understand what practice is and how we start to put those things together to start generating sick, amazing ideas. And practice is a really big part of that. Because it's the temperament to your career. It's about how you approach making and doing. And sometimes artists spend years in practice mode. Some artists never stop practicing. As a songwriter, I'm always a practitioner because I'm always going to be that person that wants to learn and wants to develop and uses every situation, every stage, every performance to kind of better my practice, as well as sometimes seeing it as the creativity and as the product as well. But ultimately, having a really strong work ethic and practice, having brilliant ideas and having a culture around the way you approach those things will lead to your ideas kind of lifting off into a network and community, which is the next part of what we're going to talk about. So I want to focus on your network being your net worth and breaking down exactly what we mean by that. So to build a network is like having a community, and it's having a bank of resources based on people and skills around you. And that goes back to our first word of currency, and that becoming something which is where you build your creative career from. From personal experience, having a network and building one has been like a godsave, especially since things shut down in the pandemic and you really rely on your network to kind of pull you through situations and tough times. And as freelancer, you know, sometimes if you're in a fortunate position as a freelancer, you end a contract and know exactly where your next job is, but sometimes you don't. And sometimes it's that network that then offers the next hand, or there's somewhere you can freelance or doors you can knock on to say, okay, what do I do next with these brilliant ideas that I have, all these amazing skills, and how do you kind of move that forward? So how do you build a network, especially if you're just fresh into the arts, and this might even be your introduction into making, or you know, you're just kind of starting out, or even if you're already established, how do you like build on what you've already done? And I think the first thing is be genuine, be a nice person, and it sounds easier than it is, but it's actually quite an interesting thing, because you have to work on being great, because it's not something that you just wake up overnight and, you know, your greatness means that it's everywhere and everybody knows who you are. It's not that simple. I think being genuine is more or less quite easy, but being great isn't, because you have to build on those skills and those attributes, and it takes time for your authenticity to show through in what it is, because sometimes it comes out around different people or it's different situations, and you kind of have to like kiss a few frogs, if that's a good example of, you know, just going through the motions of things. And it takes time to become well-rounded in that practice, but generally speaking, to get your foot in that door, I think being a nice person is way up there on the list. Other things as well on my list that are up there are not so much about the skill set yet, and we do get to that point in terms of like having the skills, but they're more attributes about your character and temperament. I think, respect is also a good way to build a network. I think equally you have to give something to get something, if that makes sense. Like, you can't expect everybody to just come and give you something and you just come with, like in Jamaican culture we say, like, you don't go to a party with a long hand, which means you don't go without bringing a drink or bringing a bottle or a plate of food. And I think sometimes if all you have is respect and being a nice person, that is enough to get you in the door, because that is generally speaking all people want. And in my experience, people do business with people, not business to business. Like, there is B2B communications, but generally in the freelance world, people are investing in you as the creative and as your business and the things that you want to kind of achieve. So yeah, being you, being genuine and being respectful, definitely up there. And then we move into like things that you can learn, skills about how to be creative. We talked about that already. But things that I think kind of is a mix between, yes, you can learn these skills, but some of it's natural, is about your actual ideas, having good ideas and being able to, the skills we learned before about being able to discern what's an idea and what's a brilliant idea. That is part of it. But generally speaking, being creative, being like full of energy and being inspired and actually seeing something that other people can't see, and that being your magic. And I think building on those things are things that keep you around. So we've got the things that get you in the door, but the things that keep you around start to move into like creative ideas, your essence, your magic, that thing that no one else has, that you found within yourself that you want to share with people. And then ultimately how you package that and how you build those skills and those ideas into something that's tangible, which again, all these things do take time. They're not things that just happen overnight. But yeah, having great ideas and then having a way to deliver those things professionally are the things that keep you around. I think the things that make you come back in terms of like sticking with the network is about integrity and having a standard. So they might sound like the first set in terms of like values based, but I think having an integrity standard with your work, a moral compass around like, okay, I completely stand against like xenophobia or homophobia, for example, and any inch of that being seen in work that you do as a freelancer, and being like zero tolerance, that's a no for me. And being confident enough to voice those things gives you creative integrity and allows the network to become more strong based on people who have shared values with you. And that is a better environment than working with people that, just sometimes-ish, or sometimes they say things and sometimes they don't, right? We only want to work with people who want to work with us and who share those core values. So yeah, having creative integrity and a standard of like work and what excellence looks like to you is a big thing. So this is something that I kind of feel is an overall opinion, and I have mentioned the word temperament before, but I think it's about the drive. I think it's about your passion and wanting to actually put your mark on the world. And I'm a deep person, I'm a deep songwriter. If you've ever listened to my songs, then you'll definitely know. But I genuinely think that being a creative is deeper than the surface level, and the things that drive you might not be anything to do with the creative arts industry. It might be the fact that you want to be financially free, or that you want to help people who have survived domestic violence, for example, because you've seen that, or you've been a part of that, or it's just something that you don't like. The value system behind what drives you and what motivates you is the overarching thing, because actually that's the thing that keeps you going when the bills are not being paid. That's the thing that keeps you doing that internship for the first part of your career when you're getting your foot in the door, because your drive is overarching everything, your hunger, your passion. And I think those things kind of innately glue all of it together. And somebody who's already established, whether that's like in your network or not, will be able to see those things and see those characteristics and think, actually, whatever stage you are at emerging or established, I can see that potential in you, and I can see that you're passionate, and I believe in that. And those attributes, before you even talk about money, before you even talk about what could or shouldn't happen, those things should be able to shine through. Obviously, most creative industries, we still have some traditions, like we have interview processes, and there's ways to get jobs in the arts, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But ultimately, those characteristics can be seen when the right people are in front of you and looking, and being able to, like, you know, help you get into the arts or into the industries. So I also think that going back to network being your net worth, so we've talked a little bit about the attributes of you in that network and how to shine in that space. I think it's good to be able to then identify who it is you want. It goes back to our ideas, doesn't it? So if we think about, I want to be a filmmaker, for example. So I might need to then think about, what do I need around me in my network to actually become a filmmaker and to have a film production company. So I might start with the actual equipment. So firstly, I need to know how much it's going to cost and where I'm going to get it from. So that might be like desk research that I can do just on my computer, and I might not need anybody but the internet to help me do that. So once you found that, you could then say you found 2 film production companies in Birmingham that hire out equipment. So you could start to like build your information bank and phone them, drop into the shop, have a chat with them, and start to build that relationship with those people that can then give you the equipment to do that. Once you're at that point, then you start to think about, cool, so I know that I need a camera, I need a boom mic, I need someone to carry that boom mic, right? So I'm then going to think about, is there anyone in my close proximity who's interested in what I'm doing, who wants to help and is also starting out? You might reach out to a few friends, you might get some yeses, some nos. You might just put a post on Facebook or social media and look in Facebook groups to try and find people. But ultimately, you know, you need a bit of people power now. So that will be the next point of contact and the next ring in your network circle. Then once you've got some equipment, you know, you've got service providers, you know that you've got people to help you film. You might think, cool, so I want to make a film, but I don't have an idea to film. What am I going to film? So you might need writers, you might need a film crew, you might need, not film crew, sorry, you might need like a script writer, or you might need actors who are going to just improvise to come into that frame, and then this is the narrative of what we're going to film. So you've got your resources, you've got your idea, and you've got people. And to be quite honest, that would be enough for you to make a small film. Then you got to think about how you want that to happen within that space, within that network. So they might be the people that you share the film with in the first instance, and it might be a pilot project for you to like go and get a bigger job or land a contract or show a funder that you want to develop your idea. So you kind of go back to that first point of internet research again and start to build another ring around the pilot ideas and testing and exploring that you've done. And you can kind of apply that principle to anything that you want to create, because remember we talked about the process of your practice and that it's the art of doing something. So that could be applied to dancers, it could be applied to singers. It starts with a point of reference being like, how do you do this? Let's ask Google. And then it evolves onto who are the people that can kind of help me to build those ideas and to actually do them. I'm really big on like doing things yourself and DIY. I think that's the way to get the most fulfillment out of making and creativity. But ultimately, you know, sometimes it's about actually going to an established company like Birmingham Film Company, for example, and actually asking somebody, how do I do this? Like, is there any development programs that can help me? Could you guys help me? And asking for advice. And that's how you start to build your network as well in that way. Net worth is interesting because remember when we talked before about people and currency and whether that is, I guess the idea of looking at people as currency, because it's about motion, it's about movement and like a ripple effect. And that's what I mean by your network is your net worth, because that ripple effect of the people around you sparks work, it sparks ideas, it sparks collaboration, and it doesn't just come from one person, it's definitely from a community, it's from a hub. And the most amazing thing about building a network is that you can, by design, choose who's around you and who's in your life. And I think that those choices that you make are the makers or breakers of your career, because having good, clean-hearted contacts only means that you can make good, clean-hearted work, right? So I think that it's something to think about and to not brush over lightly. And also always look for the genuine. I think going back to that point about you being genuine and showing up as you, naturally you attract that. But I think having discernment about your network is really important, and almost protecting your contacts like you would yourself. You don't just give anybody your phone PIN number, right? So you might give that to a partner or to, a close family friend or your sister. They might know your password, but they might not use it. They don't just have access to your phone like that. So I think that same discernment about your network and protecting it and respecting and honouring that space is super important for like long-lasting relationships. And also I think as well, it's okay to mention that not everybody you come across is equally a part of your network. I think I don't want that to be a misconception of like what I mean by who gets in and out of your network. And it's not a mean thing. It's about being practical in terms of like, if I say to somebody, oh, I know that person, but I've only met them once. I don't actually really know them. I know of them and I respect their work, but we don't actually know each other. I think that network is that two-way relationship where you both see and respect each other and you both understand what each other does and how you both exist in the same spaces. So that is network, being your net worth. Hopefully I've left some food for thought more than anything in that section for you to think about how to start building a bubble around you that enables your career to spark off. So the next section is called Fortune Favours the Brave. And I love putting it in a saying like that because it actually says what it is on the tin. Fortune only comes to those who are brave enough to go after it. And I want to break that down and literally go into the word fortune and look at finance, funding, and how to secure your bag. So when we think about money, I think the first place I'd like to start is our belief systems and go back to some like personal values around money. When I was growing up in my household, I would always hear sayings like take care of the pennies and the pounds will take care of themselves. I used to hear things like God loves a giver. I used to hear things like money doesn't grow on trees. And I want you to start thinking about your relationship with money and where you started to first hear about money and where you first started to earn money. So I used to get money for cleaning the house on a Saturday before I went to town. That was the first time I had my own money, or in a Christmas card or in a birthday card. And the reason why I want you to think about those things is because actually, in the same way we have a belief system about the world, we have a belief system about money, and 9 times out of 10, when we don't feel confident enough to ask for money, it's based on our core beliefs, which is something that I've had to overcome, and I'm still overcoming that. It's still in that practicing to talk about money. So once we establish our values and belief systems around money, we can then start to work out what makes us feel comfortable to talk about £500 or £50,000 or £500,000, and actually begin to build our ways towards then valuing our ideas from a better position. as a freelancer, I think it's good to start with looking at things like musician union rates, because, or there's union rates for different art forms. There's theatre unions, music unions, there's like backstage and tech unions as well that can protect and support you. And that's a good place to start, because if you feel uncomfortable about saying, you know, I want to perform, but I want to be paid for that, there's already a standard where you can say, actually, could you meet me at musicians unions rates for the first 100 gigs you do? I don't know, however long it might take you to build confidence to ask for more, or build a reputation that's worthy of asking more. That's a good place to start, because the system, there's a standard that's already been put in place. If we are just kind of going at money and thinking about how do we generate our ideas with money, I definitely want to get into that when we talk about funding. But I think overall, we then need to still think about that idea around value, money, and how we kind of see that within ourselves. So it took me around, I'd say like 2 years of performing before I received my first performance for £500. And it might sound like a really long time, but actually I was battling a lot with like, oh, I'm just an emerging artist from Birmingham, and kind of, I'm just this. Or someone would say to me, you're a singer, and I'd be like, yeah, kind of. I'm kind of a singer-songwriter. I'm kind of an artist. Like, I'm putting all of these self-limiting words in front of me saying, I am an artist, I'm a songwriter, and I make music. It took me a long time to build my confidence in that space. So it's not actually something that you can put a timeline on. And don't be hard on yourself if you're not feeling like you're either worthy of being paid for something right now, or you do and you're not being paid. You know, it's a process. But I just think it's good to start thinking and breaking down our psyche about money. So when you then are in a position where you have a product, you've got a piece of art, you've got something you've created, and you want to start thinking about how to get money to do more of it, or to actually, you've got your brilliant idea and you now want to fund this idea, I think there's lots to talk about when it comes to funding and where to go and how to unpack these things. But ultimately, a funder wants a brilliant idea. So you go back to the starting point and be like, right, am I sure that this idea is brilliant enough to get funding? Then, as simple as it sounds, you read the guidance and you read the funding application. But I always would say to build that network, being your net worth, build that relationship with the funders, talk to them, go to a webinar online that they put up, and start to ask the questions. Even if you feel like you've read the guidance and you understand what it says on the website and you know all the things you need to know, just ask a question you already know the answer to and still start the conversation and start to build a relationship. There's quite a few funders that will be mostly interested in new ideas, new businesses. Some of those in music, being like Help Musicians UK, they really support artists at early stages of their career. And in fact, they're one of the funders that will support you at any stage in your career. Arts Council England, it's a bit of a tricky application to look at. I wouldn't underestimate how hard that is or how competitive it is. But I think it's still worth noting it down as a place that you can go to for investment and a place that you can speak to. I know Culture Central, obviously, that's how you've kind of landed on this video. Becoming a member of this space actually can point you in the direction of where to go, and just picking up the phone to people in the team like Erica, or just dropping her an email and being like, actually, can I discuss these ideas that I have and where I want to go with things? And that still comes part of the funding conversation, because your network builds up of knowledge, and it also builds up of people as well. So I would say most people will respond to a good idea and be able to like point you in a direction of where you can take things. So don't feel that you can't just ask people for help. Also pop me up on Girl Gwen's bits or on social media. So I'm happy to listen to any of your ideas and point you in the right direction. I think a lot of people will. And And that kind of also goes back to our psyche of feeling like confident enough to just ask the question. There's no wrong questions to ask. I think as well, like, so when we're talking about like being brave, I think that that's a big deal when it comes to talking about money. A lot of us don't come from like a silver spoon, otherwise we wouldn't be on this call. We wouldn't be watching this webinar if we had the powers of nepotism to make us just, you know, go forth and prosper. We all need a little bit of help. So I'm assuming we'll all have this common interest of not being handed this on a plate, right? So being brave is firstly showing up. It's turning on this webinar. It's actually coming to get your life. It's trying to secure your bag is the bravest step you can make. And that's usually the first one. Second to that, I think being brave in the sense of actually, how do you get from a place of asking for £1 to asking for £50,000? How do you get to the place where you can be brave enough to build your ideas to ask for more for pretty much doing the same thing, right? I think it comes from like a personal opinion of yourself, and that's also super brave. In a world where they want you to hate yourself, it's radical to love yourself, right? So if you wake up every single day and build your confidence, and okay, so if I want to learn to walk, my nephew's learning to walk at the minute actually, he's 2. So I've watched him walk from the living room chair on the right to the living room chair on the left. I have confidence that he can now walk on his own. I've watched him walk from the living room to the kitchen, and then I watched him walk from the front door to the car, obviously holding my hand. But I now have confidence that he can walk, and I've seen him do it. And more to the point, he has confidence in himself more than I do, because he tries to run off. So he's now got legs and he thinks, oh yeah, I've got this walking thing down, because he's done it so many times and he's told his body, yes, I can do this. And I think you have to do that when it comes to building an idea and building like a narrative around funding and money, because there will be knocks that come and there will be like an element of rejection. But the more confident you are, the more you can assert yourself and articulate yourself, is the more likely you are to be. So I hope you like the little example. I'm going to put a resource of my nephew here. I'm totally joking. But no, literally, I genuinely feel like having self-belief and knowing your worth is super important when it comes to securing the bag, because you have to be confident that if you're going to say to somebody like Arts Council, this project is worth £15,000 and here's the reasons why, and this is the breakdown of how we're going to spend that money, then boom, you are halfway through getting your foot in the door, and the issues that might prevent it then don't become about your idea. They become about the funders stuff, like how many people they can fund and how many people applied in that round. And that's nothing to do with you or your idea. And it doesn't mean that those reasons don't make the idea not good enough. I think on our side of things, all we can do is build confidence and build a plan. There is a language when it comes to funding, and I think it's always good to try to get some funding training if you can. And I will definitely send some links to funders that I know that give training, and specifically funders that give like one-to-one talks. Because as well as reading the guidance, I think sometimes what I've noticed when I've looked at applications I've done in the past that I've not been successful with, I haven't actually answered the question. So I think really deep in the question and being able to, like, if someone says, tell us about your project idea, rather than using the small word space to talk about why I'm good at doing the idea, it's actually to just talk about the idea that I want to do and be really, really clear, quite literal, quite matter of fact, and take all the waffle out of the words and just say exactly what it is. I think that's also really good around the process of building your confidence, the process of knowing how to match your idea, and then kind of like having something sharp to say, which I think when you're talking about money, it's political, isn't it? It's like it needs to be sharp and concise, where the creativity can be emotional and fluid and back to the thing that you actually want to do, right? But there is a side that we need to talk about that in a quite literal way. So fortune favouring the brave is literally what it says on this tin. I don't think there is anything that I have ever received apart from the money that I used to get in birthday cards that I haven't worked for, that I haven't put the time and energy in for, or I haven't done the years of like freelance work or skills development or the training programs to like build towards something. So, you know, I heard a story the other day about Picasso, and a woman asked Picasso to draw a picture on a napkin in a coffee shop. And I don't know if this is like gospel true or not, but it was a good story anyway. She asked him to draw a picture on the napkin. So he said, yeah, sure. And he drew a picture on the napkin. And then she went to take it back from him. And he went, that'll be £5,000, please. And she was like, what? But you've just drawn on a napkin. Like, I just asked you. You said yes. Like, why are you trying to charge me? And he said, no, it didn't just take me 5 minutes to doodle on a napkin. It took me 15 years of developing my craft, of having nobody look at my work, of having, you know, countless and countless of canvases at the back of my workshop tent to draw on the napkin and for you to know who Picasso is and to be mad for my work like that. So I always like that story, whether it's true or not, because the sentiment is actually about the time it took for him to build his confidence, the time it took for him to build his narrative and build his craft, and then be able to actually put a price point to it and be confident, because it wasn't just a 5-minute doodle. It was years and years and years of graft and hard work. And sometimes that is the reason why the price goes up for doing exactly the same thing, and why you can do a 20-minute set and get paid nothing, but you could do a 20-minute set and be paid £2,000. It's about craft. It's about musicianship and artistry versus confidence and self-belief. And that formula will allow you to grow. And I think being realistic with where you are on that scale is good. It's good. It's basically be realistic, be real with yourself about things. And yeah, I think just leaning back into your network to ask for help. And it's okay if there's somebody that's already established that you've identified. So if we're talking about music, we're talking about an artist in Brum who's really nice and approachable. So Lady Sanity, for example, she's a great artist. I bet you if any of you DM'd Lady Sanity right now to say, oh, hey, Lady Sanity, I'm just starting out, not sure, you know, how to price myself for a gig. I bet you any money. In fact, I bet you £100 if you DM her, yeah, she will get back to you, because people will just help. People are nice people. So you can always reach out to people who you're really inspired by and ask them questions. Obviously, if you're reaching out to Lizzo, I don't know if she's gonna get back to you, but I know people who are really about the city and who are really doing it and really like actively supporting other people. They will, because people are good people. Yeah, cool. So that is Fortune Favours the Brave. Always just, I guess the last message I want to kind of leave you with on that one is really to believe in yourself. Money, you know, I'd rather than talking to you about get an accountant and get this and get that and those practical tools of how to make money, which is something that I'm more than happy to discuss at a different time. But I feel like before you even get to those practical tools, we need to build the self-confidence and start to process our psyche around money and how it makes us feel. Yeah, so I just want to kind of leave you on that sentiment of being brave, being bold, being unapologetic and being realistic. So, cool. So this section is called Mind Over Matter. And it's actually about well-being. And I think that this is arguably the most important section we've spoken about today, and that's why I've left it last, because I think it's most important. It's more, your well-being is more important than money, it's more important than network, and it's more important than creativity. I know sometimes it feels like we'd die for our art and would do anything for people to like us and we'll do anything to secure the bag. But ultimately, we can't do that. We have to look after our well-being first. And there's lots of things about the creative arts industry that actually, I'm going to be 100% real with you, like it's unhealthy. The work culture of being in the creative arts industry and the way that freelancers are made to feel without that job security, that we always have to be looking for the next job, or we, as a culture, we don't get paid to rest. Like unless you're taking like annual leave from your job, that's the only kind of culture that allows you to be paid. Or if you get sick at work, the government have put in place things like you get a certain amount of time for sick pay. But as a freelance creative, we don't really get those things. So it permits a culture where we will literally make ourselves sick to work, and we will work when we're sick. And if we don't work when we're sick, we don't get paid, right? So it's a perpetual cycle, because I fully understand and empathise with, wanting to always know where your money's coming from and securing your bag and all of those things, and like being at that networking event and not missing it and just getting those contacts. But actually, we have to really like strip things back down to ourselves and really connect. So one thing that I do at the start of every year is plan out my year. And obviously it's a loose held plan, strongly visioned, but loosely held, because I don't always know what's going to happen in my career and I've got to be flexible. But what I will do is definitely plan some time off around my birthday, which is in April. So it kind of gives me a nice structure for that first few months of the year to like get myself together, to start building up the momentum of work. And then I've got a short break around my birthday. And then towards the end of summer, so I just had some time off after the Commonwealth Games. So that was, naturally I would put time in then anyway, around August, September. But it just so happened that it lined up with like work finishing that time as well. So I had some time then, and then I have as much time as I possibly can off around Christmas. And that might lead into the first week of January if I want to have a full time, and I might work right up to that, or it's the other way around and I start early in January. But generally I plan in long periods of rest, because if I didn't, every time the break is there and it comes, I'm relieved and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so glad. And I really honour that space and don't put meetings in. I will try my very best not to answer phone calls that are work related. And I generally just, don't plan meetings in, don't plan activity, things that really task me in that time. But at the same time, I was talking to my therapist the other day, and I'm changing that process because it worked for me before and it might work for you now. And that's why I still mention it as a tool, because it did work for me for quite some time. But actually, what I need to do and start doing is to create more short periods of rest, and have routines and regimes that kind of permit my body to relax. So one thing that had happened over lockdown was that my room became a place where I ate, where I slept, which I've kind of always done those things. But it also became a place where I recorded music. It became my live gig background because my wallpaper is amazing. So I started doing live gigs from my bedroom. I started working and applying for funding and building my business from my bedroom. So it became 5 things, 3 of which it never was before. And even all till now, and we're like, out and about, some of the habits and the culture that I have at home and the culture that I have in my room is still that it's like a polarized work, polarized, relaxed vibe. So I need to start building in a regime, which means that my space for relaxation is sacred and that I don't actually let things infiltrate into that, and that will overall improve my well-being. It doesn't mean go out and buy a bunch of paint and start painting your mum's walls in her house, or if you live by yourself, like, you don't need to run to Wilco. It's totally fine. But I think having a healthiness around your space and actually working out what comes in here, what doesn't come in here, when do I work and when I don't work, really kind of set the tone for like a really healthy relationship with your freelance career. And I think, you know, there's something about going back to when we spoke about fortune and finance in that section of the seminar, to think about the way that organisations and the sector is moving forward. So there's companies in Bradford and Bristol that I've heard about having alternative ways of supporting freelancers. So once you finish a project, you get 3 paid days for restorative care, and that's time to rest from delivering the work that they've asked you to do. And things like that as a culture moving forward gives freelancers a space to actually decompose and to take a beat and to conscientiously start thinking about rest. And if you're a freelancer, you can build some of those rest points into funding applications. And you can also build in therapy. So I know that it's expensive, and some therapists are charging like £60 an hour for things like the services. And again, they're charging that much because of their experience and because of the value per minute in that scenario, for a space to talk and really work on yourself. But applications like applying to Arts Council specifically allow you room to actually embed therapy into your access needs and start to bring in that culture again of looking after yourself while you're working. And it's important that while I do this 9-month project, I've built in some therapy sessions for me to start to unpack and start to process, or I've built in some evaluation time for me to like reflect and report on my findings and all of that good stuff. So I think those things are really important. And I think with rest, so right at the start of the seminar, we talked about thoughts turning into things, and thoughts turning into feelings, which turn into things. And that is a principle that comes from the law of attraction. And there's a book by a man called Deepak Chopra, and he talks about the 7 spiritual laws of success. And one of those, and it's the same with law of attraction, is least effort. And I think there's something about letting things come to you and allowing things to happen based on the thoughts and the feelings that we have. It sounds a bit airy-fairy, but trust me, just stay with me on this one, because if you can take time to rest and be still, I guarantee after a sustained amount of time doing that, you'll start to feel new ideas coming, and you'll start to feel things just happening. And periods of stillness are spaces that like are synonymous with discovery, because actually you give your body time to stop doing what it's used to doing, those habits, that culture that we create, and you step outside of your own culture that you've created and start a new one based on relaxation and least effort, and allow things to kind of, you know, materialize and manifest for you, and just to come up in your mindset and in the things you think about. There's lots of different ways that you can relax. It can be walking, going for massages. I don't need to necessarily preach to the choir on those things, but I do feel like finding your zen is really important when it comes to being a freelance creative. And that's something that's ongoing. It's not just something you do at the start. And 9 times out of 10, most creatives don't start with that plan. We figure that out halfway through after nearly burning out and being like, okay, that's not going to happen to me again. So if you can start adding it in from the beginning, then you're on to building like a really healthy career path for yourself. So I think in the arts industry, it's really interesting when we talk about our bodies and when we talk about rest. And as people, you know, making and doing art, usually about humanity, right? In one way, shape or another. It's about capturing humanity, or it's about reflecting and responding to how bodies move, or we're writing about people. I think it's still really interesting and quite polarized and really different when we actually start talking about our bodies as the people creative, because it's like, if you don't show up on a freelance job, you let the side down and you let the team down, and it's all about people power, and there's that culture around, we're in this and we need you to be that, and an element of professionalism and showing up and being on time, and the culture that we work when we're sick, and all of these things kind of feed back into that. But generally speaking, like as a woman, I think, and other people who kind of experience the same things or similar things that women feel, like there's naturally, we have times of the month where our bodies go through things. And I think it's important for men and women to have this conversation and to understand this, and I will make the point land. But like, yeah, so I feel like every month we go through cycles in our body and things happen. And if we had a culture around allowing that process to be what it is, because it's different for different bodies, right? So some people experience their cycles really painfully, others don't. If there was a culture around being able to build that into work and freelance life as a way to look after our bodies, we might start thinking about that. Generally speaking, we might start just thinking about that in everywhere. Okay, so if I've got really bad migraines and I experience those under certain lighting or whatever it is, the culture of the work environment might still allow you to be in that job. You might be able to work from home. There might be adaptations that happen. Same if you're having really intense cycles. If there was a culture around allowing people to work from home and building those things in, it might just become a social norm. It might start to become a culture. But because we don't talk about it, and because people's bodies and their pain is not something that's at the forefront, unless it's something scary and horrific and awful like COVID, then we don't actually start to pay attention to the way that we behave. And I think as freelancers, this is where the point lands, I think that it's our responsibility to build importance around our health into our workplace, and not being afraid to actually speak to the people you're freelancing with explicitly about what your needs are, and looking at health like an access requirement, rather than looking at it like, oh yeah, I'll be fine, I'll just get on, or I'll work when I'm sick, or I'm in excruciating pain for the next 5 days, but I'm still gonna show up and not explain to anyone and pretend like I'm not, or only talk to some other person who might experience it too that I'm working with, and nobody else. I think it's about us starting to build healthy conversations in, and being unapologetic, and educating and informing people that don't experience the same things that you, as you, or as me, or as somebody that you know, because that's the way that we create a new culture and a subculture of like new age freelancers that like so on it with talking about health and well-being, that the old school cats just get kicked out of that way, and they have to just join in basically. And that's like literally how people power works. So I think it's really important, and it doesn't mean that you have to be sipping, herbal tea every day and holding a Zen vibe and doing your meditation, because health looks different to different people. And yeah, I think just being really honest again with yourself, and doing whatever you need to do for you, and making sure you take those breaks, and starting to like, I think therapy is cool. And as I mentioned before, I'm in therapy, and it helps me to like work out the triggers and work out like listening to my body's language of saying, okay, we're not gonna have like a full on burnout, but now would be a really good time to take 2 days to just sit down and chill out, because actually that indicator saves me in the long run, rather than how I previously mentioned, I was planning my years out with 2 weeks breaks here and there every 4 months. Just didn't work well. So yeah, you got to find your mojo and find your magic. And all of this, if this bit's sorted out, we can then secure the bag we can build that finance and clear up some of the stuff that we have around our relationship with money. We can be a strong and contributing citizen or creative citizen within our network when we're right. So when our health is 10 out of 10 or even 6, 7 out of 10, you know, when we're just doing good, right, we're able to better contribute and better serve our community and the network and give just as much as we take. And also then your creative ideas just flow better. Some artists, me being one of them, can write a good heartbreak song because I've been through it, and I can write about painful things, but I can also write about happy things. And over time of like my well-being just being better, I don't need to be experiencing trauma to make art, which is sometimes where a lot of creative inspiration comes from pain. But actually when your well-being is good, you can tap into pain and become an empath and go into happiness and joy, or see pain or see joy and make from a healthy place rather than making from a place of like trauma or desperation or heartache or just like ecstatic joy all the time, which is also extremely unhealthy, to be the complete polar opposite. But like, you know, you don't make from that place when you make from a place of well-being, and that's why Mind Over Matter is the most important session of all 4 sessions. But I hope you've enjoyed my webinar. I'm Namywa, as I said at the beginning. If you want to shout me, just get me on social media at Namywa Music. Or if you want to reach out and find out more about Girl Grind, you can do that by going to www.girlgrinduk.co.uk or just find us on social media at Girl Grind UK.